When it comes to horror movie monsters, there are plenty of heavy hitters, from the slashers of the 80s to the many different giant monsters to the strange critters that keep on coming. There is so much to discuss. However, a lot of should-be classics just don't seem to be front of mind, and that is a tragedy. So today we're going to bring up some less loved but totally worthy monsters that deserve more attention. It's time for the top 5 horror movie monsters nobody talks about. But before we get to the list, we've got a special message from today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. So stop what you're doing and ask yourself this: when was the last time you felt like the most powerful being in the world? It's been a while, right? Fret not though, you can find some of that feeling of power by taking control of some of the coolest and strongest monsters in the world's biggest, best, and most badass mobile game. Test out millions of team combinations as you slice and dice your way through dungeon runs, huge boss fights, and PvP arena matches. Keep your champions powerful with unique artifacts and skills, and show off your skills by raiding your way. Use the links down below to download Raid yourself on mobile and PC. I've been doing raid promotions for a while now, I've been with Top 5 Scary for just over a year, and it's all gone by so quickly. I definitely have a different camera presence than I used to, and I've grown a lot more hair since the pandemic started. Raid has been great during my time here, as it's given me the opportunity to polish up my copywriting skills and help the channel grow. Raid recently released its biggest ever update, the Doom Tower. It's a giant tower with 120 floors and a bunch of secret challenge rooms, and 12 seriously badass bosses to take on. I've been having a blast with it so far. It is a huge challenge, but I'm having a lot of fun trying to beat it. On top of that, Raid also just released a bunch of amazing new champions, and there'll be even more coming this month. With over 500 champions in-game now, trust me when I say there is a champion for everyone. And if you have a special champion on your mind, keep an eye out for special Valentine's Day events this month. Go to the video description, click on the special links, and if you are a new player, you can get 50,000 silver, 50 gems, 1 energy refill, 1 clan boss key, 5 mystery shards, 1 day XP booster, and 1 free champion, Executioner. All this treasure will be waiting for you right here. Alright, let's get on with the list. Coming in at number 5, we've got Grabbers from Grabbers. There is an absolute wealth of funny, self-aware, and super creative horror out there, and a lot of it does go under the radar. Like, it'll win an award at a smaller film fest and get featured at a popular midnight screening and then spend its days wasting away on a non-premiere streaming service. Or maybe it doesn't even make it onto a streaming service and folks have to scrounge for the DVDs. Stuff like Wolf Cop, Black Sheep, and the Banana Splits movie. Maybe it's just me, but I think movies like these deserve to be in the modern movie lexicon way more often than they are. Give it 20 years or so and we'll see how the filmgoers of the future like them. Grabbers is one of these movies. Immaculately shot with a phenomenal cast, but it's low budget and it comes from a not so premier movie making market, so it gets lost in the shuffle. They could make a whole cheesy series based on these monsters, hitting up different seaside towns with different drinking cultures, but I doubt it'll ever happen. The Grabbers themselves are incredible though. Horrific little tentacle things with blood-sucking leechy mouths and a penchant for seeking out people wherever they may be. It's just an excellent utilitarian monster design, and they can do so much too. Give them a rainy town and you'll watch the chaos ensue. The little ones can shuffle around, finding different sources of blood even if they're hiding away. Plus, they don't quite die when they dry up, they just wait for another chance to moisten up and attack people. Then there's the big ones. They roll around looking for fresh blood, and if they can come across a liquored up individual, they can still dispatch them with a swift flick of the tentacle. Seriously, how can such a fun and freaky monster not be at the forefront of all sorts of horror conversations, especially when the best way to combat them is to get super drunk? It's a mystery for sure, but with plenty of people turning to getting sozzled as a coping mechanism during lockdowns, we can be sure that we're safe from these freaks. But again, I implore producers and other well-moneyed folks out there to make another Grabbers. Send the creatures to a new locale and let's see some more drinks go down. It'll be fun, I promise. And you know what? If it doesn't sound like a good idea right now, it will after a couple beverages. Give it a shot. Coming in at number 4, we've got The Stuff. When it comes to world-consuming goop, most folks are more familiar with The Blob. There's the iconic 1958 version featuring a young Steve McQueen and a bangin' theme song, and then there's the 80s version which is strange and beautiful in all of its own ways. But there's another deadly goo out there that outweirds both blobs, and it often goes undiscussed. Yeah, we're talking about The Stuff. You just can't get enough. How does it work? Why does it grow under the earth? Why has nobody found it before now? Who cares? It looks like marshmallow fluff, tastes incredible, and takes America by storm through some clever marketing and low-calorie brainwashing. In addition to being a deadly monster, it's also a metaphor for the dangers of modern Western consumerism and the carelessness of the folks up top. What more could you ask for? Well, a whole lot more apparently, because not only do we get a wild ride and a less than hidden message, but we also get some jaw-droppingly strange performances, a bunch of near nonsensical one-liners, and a big pile of hilarious practical effects. Want to see some white foam crawl up the walls in a room and then get burned to a crisp? Or maybe you'd like to see a whole militia get subsumed by a torrent of fluff. Better yet, let's watch a man named Chocolate Chip Charlie, famed for his martial arts expertise and snack food excellence, get melted from the inside out while he spews foam from a too wide mouth. It's just the stuff of legends, and it's a shame that so many people only know this movie as a goofy blob ripoff. It is so much more than that, even if it is extremely silly. More movies like The Stuff need to be made, and for that to happen, more folks need to be talking about the stuff. When you come up with a monster that is both edible and somehow manages to consume the people eating it, you know you've got a gem. It's fascinating and funny, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. Internal logic, we don't need that where we're going, so grab your spoons and your shaving cream. It's time to find the stuff. Coming in at number 3, we've got Pumpkinhead. If you were to survey all sorts of folks about what horror villains they remembered, you'd probably get a lot of the big boys. You know, Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, Chucky, Pennywise, maybe Ghostface. All well-deserved for sure, but there's a few movie monsters that manage to slip through the cracks of our collective subconscious, and they don't get the universal acclaim and recognition that they deserve. Pumpkinhead is one such monster. He's got everything going for him: a wicked design, an action-packed first outing, a classic revenge-fueled backstory, and more. So why doesn't Pumpkinhead get talked about in the same breath as many of the other fiends I mentioned earlier? And that is a pretty good question. Maybe the story of the first movie is just too tragic, or maybe the revenge that Ed Harley enacts is just too brutal. It could be that Pumpkinhead came along too late in the 80s and wasn't fresh enough to leave that same lasting impression on the public at large. But looking back on the wicked kills and disturbing implications of its existence, we can see that Pumpkinhead can swing with the best of them. Just look at them. There are sequels, but none of them got a theatrical release. It's a known phenomenon that sequels usually tend to be less good than the original, but most horror franchises get a couple theatrical outings before going to home video. Ah well, at least Terror Dome acknowledges Pumpkinhead's place among the best of the horror icons. Coming in at number 2, we've got Bethoga. The Relic might not be the world's best horror movie, but it introduced the world to the Bethoga, and that's more than enough for me. Also known as He Who Walks on All Fours, it's somewhat based on the skinwalkers of Navajo lore. An absolute chimera of a monster, there's a smorgasbord of DNA floating around inside this horrid creature. You've got the speed of a greyhound, the intelligence of a man, and the adaptability of a gecko. It stinks, and it loves to kill people. And of course, it looks like a nightmare wrapped up in slime and scales. Goodness gracious. When so much goes into the creation of a monster, you really do have to give it props for even existing at all. It is too bad that the movie was underwhelming, because a monster like this deserves plenty of time in the spotlight, although it definitely manages to be stealthier in the dark. Originally an anthropologist named John Whitney, the excess consumption of some mysterious mushroom soup causes a hormonal imbalance and begins to enact mutations. Before his mutation fully completes, he manages to sneak aboard a ship and makes it back to Chicago. It's here that Bethoga truly becomes a monster, stalking the tunnels beneath the Museum of Natural History and eating people's brains. Totally radical. Kinda makes me want to be an anthropologist. And last up at number 1, we've got the vines. Now here is a controversial take. Of all the monsters on this list, the number 1 pick for this list is a bunch of deadly plants. That's right, we're not talking about the Triffids either, or whatever the hell was going on in the Happening. It's time to talk about those vines from The Ruins. Based on the book of the same name, The Ruins is a truly terrifying ride through a plant-filled nightmare. Getting tangled in vines is one thing, and any plants with defense mechanisms like thorns or poison can be pretty scary too. But these particular climbing plants are malicious and malevolent. They can think, they can trick people, they can imitate voices and other sounds. Imagine for a moment getting outsmarted by a plant. And then the plant tortures you, eats your friends, and continues to psychologically torment any survivors. These things are so horrible, the locals literally enforce deadly quarantine on anyone who stumbles across the hill on which they grow. So if you haven't seen The Ruins, I'd advise going and doing that now, and maybe read the book too. With so many monsters out there, it's tough to give credence to them all, but today I hope to have brought some attention to a few that need a little more love. So what'd you think of the list? Have you seen these movies? What horror movie monster needs more attention? Are there any that are overrated? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more crunchy ones. From the top 5 SCP monsters that can't be found, part 2. Taya001 says, it's funny to be scared of things like Freddy and Jason when we have SCPs that can destroy them in seconds. I'd personally like to chuck Chucky into the never-ending stairway. Have fun in there for eternity. See, I'd be careful while introducing horror villains to SCPs because they might just get along and that will not end well for us. On day release says, Keegan, are you part of the SCP Foundation? That's classified. Sovereign Smurf says, what about Mr. Lost or Waldo? Yeah, we couldn't find them either. Zavir Kennard says, if I make my own SCP, will you review it? Only if it makes it onto the wiki proper. And Ajay says, Keegan, you only gave us 4 SCPs on this list. Shoot, really? My bad, folks. I'll make sure not to forget next time. And that's the time we have for today. I am going to drink pure almond extract. Thanks again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.